The call to the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I thank the member for Ballarat and the member for Lilly for their contributions to this debate, and of course the member for Moore. I've put myself in the unenviable position of being just in front of the member for Kingsford Smith, who no doubt will surpass anything I have to say in this chamber, especially on this critical topic. I am, however, of course, somewhat confused by what the member for Lilly said when she claimed that Labor is in favour of a domestic maritime fleet for Australia, because when they were in Parliament they moved legislation that saw the number of maritime vessels that were under the Australian flag decimated. And so I can't understand how Labor on one hand can say that they're in favour of it, but on the other hand introduce policies that see our fleet decline to virtually nothing. I rise to speak, though, on this important the Protection of the Sea Amendment Bill for 2019. The motivation behind this amendment is cleaner air and cleaner oceans. Therefore, I'm proud to speak in support of this bill today. My electorate of McKellar is home to some of Australia's most beautiful coastal gems, including Longreef Aquatic Reserve and various pristine beaches that draw thousands of visitors in every day. It is my duty to act and speak in a way which advocates for the health and sustainability for these places. The northern beaches of Sydney pride themselves on their clean beaches, relaxed atmosphere and the care they take in looking after the community they live in. This wonderful community deserves a voice in this Parliament, and it is only right and proper that I represent their views on environmental responsibility and environmental sustainability in this Parliament on this day. This bill will have a direct impact on my constituents' home of sandstone and whitewash, and therefore is a matter of utmost importance to me. My electorate holds environmental responsibility and sustainability very highly, and therefore I must express my complete support for this bill and its motivations lying behind it. Fresh air and thriving oceans must be high on Australia's list of priorities, because without these it will not be possible to survive. The vast majority of Australia's population can be found in coastal areas, and hence the health and cleanliness of our air and oceans has to be a focal point for discussion in this House. It is clear that this bill serves to implement the maximum allowable sulphur content in ship fuel oil, to which the International Maritime Organisation has made universal come January 2020. By lowering the high sulphur content in ship fuel oil, this government is committing itself to a vision of environmental sustainability and caring for the majority of its population who live along our beautiful coastline. This amendment is also necessary to fulfil our duty to the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, to which Australia is a signatory. We must continue to uphold the values to which we sign up to, and must continue to foster our great relationship with the Pollution from Ships Convention in order to progress in reducing emissions into our great oceans and waterways. This amendment also allows for the advancement of environmentally protective technology. This comes in the form of air pollution cleaning systems known as scrubbers or EGC systems. Such cleaning apparatus remove toxic and damaging components in the air, such as sulphur oxides and nitrogen oxides. If untreated, these harmful pollutants can cause high levels of air pollution and thus pose a large threat to our beautiful coastline and ocean-based ecosystems. The bill outlines that ships can only continue to use high-level sulphur fuel oil if the boat is fitted with a scrubber or EGC systems, which means that the overall emissions from the boat are lowered to the equivalent of using 0.5% sulphur content oil fuels. Hence, the bill supports increased air quality and the preservation of our ecosystem. On the 1st of January 2020, it is hoped that nearly all boats and ships will be held accountable for the amount of sulphur and air pollution they emit. Australia is a Category B IMO Council member, and hence we must align ourselves with initiatives that reduce ship pollution and ensure our maritime regulatory framework complies with global standards. It is important to iterate that 99% of Australia's trade is carried by international shipping by volume. That means that our country, an open and free country, a country that trades with other nations, that shares the jewels of our great land, has one of the largest interests in international seaborne trade, and therefore it is imperative that we continue to foster our relationships with the international maritime trade community and promote a progressive and up-to-date approach to trade regulations and frameworks, because that is what the Liberal Party has always done, and that is what we will do here today. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is also of great importance that Australia must not isolate itself from the global trade community. As the sulphur cap is expected to be implemented globally on the 1st of January 2020, Australia will be impacted by the change whether or not we enforce the rule in our own regulations. It is very important to also consider that our largest trading partner, China, has already implemented the 0.5% cap on sulphur content in fuel oils for all ports and sea territory since the beginning of 2019. We must follow. We must lead. If we do not pass on the cuts, it will make us look as though we do not care about the increasing rate of air pollution and increased emissions into our airspace over our water jurisdictions. We must be clear to those that we trade with that we demand these changes. We must work with our global trade partners and therefore should recognise the benefits of this bill and how it will protect our great climate and those who inhabit it. The underlying push behind this bill is that Australians will be the ultimate benefactors of this change. Our coastal communities and sea life will see major benefits and rewards that come with cleaner air and cleaner oceans. These benefits relate to both health and the environmental factors which increase the life of our planet and ensure our oceans can be utilised by future generations for a millennia to come. Ocean acidification is an important issue in today's world and is an issue that we as a coastal population must take very seriously. Toxic and unhealthy emissions such as sulphur oxide and nitrogen oxide can contribute to increased levels of ocean acidification and thus present as a danger to our marine ecosystems and ultimately the temperature and cleanliness of our oceans. This amendment bill aligns with the Morrison government's policy on protecting Australia's wildlife and protecting the environment in which its citizens live. Therefore, it is only logical that we follow along with this push to cut out unnecessary air pollution arising from high sulphur content fuel oils being burnt to propel boats in our waters. It is from this that I believe it is reasonable to conclude that the positives of this amendment bill greatly outweigh any drawbacks. The notion of obligation is also a major necessity in the debate of this amendment bill. Australia is a signatory to the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, and therefore we must lead through with our agreement to the terms and conditions of the Convention. This is the main international convention for addressing pollution from ships caused to the marine environment from both operational and accidental causes. The Convention was first adopted by the International Maritime Organisation in 1973 and came into force in Australia in 1988. It must be acknowledged by the House that we implement the terms of the Convention through the Protection of the Sea, Prevention of Pollutions from Ships Act 1983 and the Navigation Act of 2012. The bill in front of us, being spoken on today, primarily proposes amendments to these acts to implement amendments to Annex 6 of MARPOL in relation to the new sulphur requirements. The point here is that we have signed an agreement and we must view it as an obligation on our part to adjust our regulations as to replicate and enforce the regulations that have been put forward by the Convention and the International Maritime Organisation. The key aspect of this amendment is whether the change will be welcomed by the bill's key stakeholders. In response to this, it is very pleasing to note that the Australian maritime industry has openly expressed its support of Australia proposing to legislate and enforce the implementation of the 2020 sulphur cap in order to maintain a global playing field that is level with other major trading partners. It is reassuring to know that the Australian Maritime Safety Authority will be the body responsible for monitoring and enforcing compliance in regard to the newly proposed sulphur regulatory regime being introduced on the 1st of January 2020. When non-compliance to the amended bill is found, appropriate action will be taken by the AMSA. This action will include detaining a ship at port or even the commencement of legal proceedings. On top of this, the Protection of the Sea, Prevention of Pollution from Ships Act 1983 already includes penalties, which the member for Lilly generously spoke of, for the use of fuel with sulphur content more than the prescribed limit. It must be noted that the amendment bill will offer similar penalties for the carriage of high sulphur fuel from 1 March 2020 onward. In regard to identifying non-compliance, I support the process by which the AMSA proposed to ensure that boats carry sulphur-compliant fuel. Port State Control Officers will conduct ship inspections in line with usual Port State control practices, which means that thorough inspections of incoming and exiting boats. This will result in adequate protection and reasonable rates of detection. This amendment does not introduce any new regulatory burdens on the industry and needs to pass this House in order for Australia to be ready to enforce the sulphur cap as proposed on the 1st of January 2020. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is said that to creep furtively is to prowl. This Act does none of that. We are being very clear about what we seek to achieve and wish to achieve as a parliament and as a government. Therefore, it is right to conclude that this carriage ban aims to discourage ships from emitting unnecessary amounts of harmful fuels and toxins into our air by burning high sulphur fuel oil. The key aim of this bill is to ensure that we will level global playing field for international shipping and to protect our jurisdictional waters from air pollution. I speak in support of this bill today to show my backing for highlighting the importance of environmental sustainability and the great responsibility we hold as the government and the parliament in ensuring our citizens have fresh air to breathe for generations to come. We do not prowl into this debate, Madam Deputy Speaker. We stride proudly into it and we will reduce pollution. Thank you.